Welcome back, everybody. We're diving into the world of focus today, specifically how to find it in this crazy tech-filled world we live in. You sent in this TEDx talk by Chris Bailey, and it's really got me thinking about how to reclaim my attention.
It is fascinating stuff.
Yeah. So today we're going to break down some of the surprising things we learned about how screens affect our brains.
That's
We're
right.
going to explore that power of boredom,
Yes,
and then give you some actual strategies you can take away and try out yourself. Sound good?
let's do it. I'm excited to get into Bailey's approach, really, because he combines, the personal experience with the scientific backing.
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't just say, put down your phone.
Mm.
He actually explains why it's so difficult to do that in the first place.
Exactly. And he kicks things off with this scenario that's probably way too familiar for a lot of us. It's like being constantly bombarded with screens all day long.
Screens everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere. At one point, he even calls his phone a dastardly thing. And I have to admit, there have been more than a few times where I've felt that way about my own phone.
I think we all have.
But then he, takes it a step further.
Yes,
He does this pretty radical experiment.
he does. He actually decided to limit his phone use to just 30 minutes a day.
Wow.
Can you imagine?
That's crazy. I'm so attached to my phone, I don't know what I would do.
Well, and what's even more interesting is he experienced these three major changes that I think are directly related to, your goal of improving focus.
Okay.
So his attention span actually increased. He started having more ideas,
That's awesome.
and he found himself thinking more about the future. So it really makes you wonder, what are we sacrificing when we're constantly on our devices?
Right. What are we missing out on?
Right.
But then there's, this whole other layer here, too, right? Because Bailey doesn't just stop at the, personal anecdotes. He, dives into the research on attention.
He goes deep. And one of the things that he points out is that our brains aren't just simply distracted. They're
Yeah.
overstimulated. So we're not just passively being pulled away. We're actually craving distraction.
Mm-hmm. So it's like we're seeking it out,
We are.
almost like it's an addiction or something.
It is.
Okay.
That's where the novelty bias comes in.
Okay, let's talk about that,
Yeah.
the novelty bias. It almost sounds like we're programmed to get distracted.
We are.
Oh.
Think of it like a slot machine, okay?
All right.
Every time you check your phone or scroll through social media or click on a new notification, it's like pulling the lever and hoping for that dopamine jackpot.
I can see that, the dopamine rush, yeah.
And it's real.
Yeah.
It's similar to the feeling you get, when you enjoy a really delicious meal, or even, dare I say, making love.
Wow. Okay, that puts things into perspective. No wonder it's so hard to resist those pings and notifications. So it's not that we're just weak-willed, it's that our brains are literally wired to seek out those novel stimuli.
They are.
But, okay, knowing that, what can we actually do about it?
Well, Bailey argues that we need to give our minds more space. And one surprisingly effective way to do that is by intentionally embracing boredom.
Intentionally, boredom.
Boredom.
I don't know if I follow. Isn't boredom the thing we're all trying to avoid?
That's what we think, right?
Yeah.
But Bailey flipped the script. He actually started scheduling boredom sessions. So he's deliberately engaging in tedious activities just to see what would happen.
Like what? What kind of tedious activities?
Oh, we're talking things like reading iTunes terms and conditions for an hour,
Oh, no.
or counting the zeros in the first 10,000 digits of pi.
Okay, so really boring things.
Really boring thing.
That sounds like a form of torture to me. I can barely stand reading those terms and conditions for 5 minutes,
I know.
let alone an hour.
But there's a point, right? Because what he found was that, after an initial adjustment period, boredom actually led him to an expanded attention span
Really?
and a surge in creativity.
Wow.
It's like he was training his brain to focus by intentionally depriving it of that constant stimulation.
So boredom, it's not the enemy of focus. It's actually like a pathway to it.
Exactly.
That is a pretty radical idea.
It is.
It really challenges our assumptions about how we work and think best.
It does. It suggests that we need to create space for our minds to wander, to disconnect from the constant barrage of input, and to allow those creative sparks to ignite.
And this kind of brings us to that fascinating concept of scatter focus, right? This
Yeah.
idea that our minds are actually doing important work even when they seem to be wandering aimlessly.
Exactly. And Bailey actually found that, when our minds wander, they tend to drift towards three primary areas: the past, the present, and the future.
Okay.
And what's really interesting is that we spend the most time, a whopping 48%, thinking about the future.
Hold on. You're telling me that almost half of our mind-wandering time is spent thinking about things that haven't even happened yet?
That's right.
That's wild. I would guess it was more about, like, replaying the past
Yeah.
or getting lost in, like, present anxieties, you know?
It is surprising, but it actually makes sense when you think about it.
Right.
Because our brains are constantly trying to anticipate what's next,
Right.
to plan for the future, to make sense of the world around us.
So scatter focus is not just about, like, daydreaming or getting distracted.
Right.
It's an essential part of how we think and plan and create.
Exactly. And it's something we need to cultivate, not eliminate. And Bailey suggests that we can actually encourage scatter focus by incorporating these simple, intentional practices into our daily routines.
Like what? Give me some examples. I want to know. I want to upgrade my scatter focus game. I want to see what it's all about.
I'll give you some. Well, it can be a challenge for sure
Sure.
to incorporate those things. But Bailey offers some really accessible strategies. And it's not about, massive life overhauls. It's more about those little tweaks to how we approach our daily routines.
Okay.
He's a big advocate for what he calls disconnection rituals.
Okay. I like that. Disconnection rituals.
Yeah. It's like things you can do to create space for your mind to breathe.
I like that. It makes it sound almost like ceremonial, you know?
Yeah.
Like you're intentionally stepping away from the chaos to reconnect with yourself.
It is. It is.
So what are some of Bailey's, like, go-to rituals?
Well, one that stood out to me is that he was very strict about disconnecting from the internet every day between 8 p.m. and 8 a.m.
Wow. That's pretty bold in our always connected world.
It is.
I have to admit, the thought of being completely offline for that long gives me a little bit of anxiety.
It does.
Yeah. But I can also see how freeing it would be to have those hours truly dedicated to, like, rest and recharge.
Right. No blue light, no notifications.
Yeah.
Just time to unwind, let the mind wander.
Exactly. So it's about, like, reclaiming those hours for yourself and creating a clear boundary between your, like, online life and your offline life.
Yes. And in fact, he and his fiancée, they take it a step further. They have a weekly technology Sabbath
Really?
every Sunday,
Wow.
which they describe as a day in the real, actual world.
That's awesome. So, like, at a chance to just fully unplug and engage with, like, the physical world around them.
Right.
I love that. It's such a good reminder that there's a whole world out there, beyond our screens. A world full of, like, sensory experiences and genuine human connection.
Absolutely.
But let's be real, not all of us can go completely offline for hours on end. And honestly, some of us don't even want to.
Sure.
So what are some smaller steps we can take to create those mini disconnection rituals throughout the day?
Well, think about the little pockets of time that you already have.
Mm-hmm.
Your commute, waiting in line,
Right.
even showering.
Mm-hmm.
Bailey suggests, transforming these into opportunities for intentional scatter focus.
Okay, so instead of automatically scrolling through our phones during those moments, we
Yeah.
can just be, like, just be present in the moment
Yes.
and let our minds wander.
Let them wander. Put the phone away, resist the urge to fill every second with input, and just see where your mind takes you.
It might feel uncomfortable at first, but, like, maybe that's where the magic happens, right?
That's where it happens.
Yeah, this really challenges the notion that, like, every minute of our day needs to be optimized for productivity.
It does.
It's almost like we've forgotten the value of simply being,
Yeah.
of allowing our minds to, like, rest, recharge, and make those, like, unexpected connections that can lead to breakthroughs.
Right. And speaking of breakthroughs,
Mhm.
Bailey found that intentionally embracing boredom didn't just boost his creativity. It also helped him tap into his long-term vision and plan for the future.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like when we're constantly bombarded with information and demands, we don't have the mental space to step back and actually consider the bigger picture.
That's exactly right.
It's like we're so busy reacting to the urgent, we lose sight of the important.
Yes.
But it's not just about external distractions, is it? Because we also have those internal distractions.
We do.
Those thoughts and worries and anxieties that can, like, pull us away from the present moment and, like, disrupt our focus.
They can be just as insidious.
Yeah. Oh, I know that feeling all too well. My mind's a constant whirlwind of to-do lists, worries, and, like, random thoughts that just pop into my head.
Right.
It's like I'm running a mental marathon with no finish line in sight sometimes.
I think we can all relate to that.
Yeah. So what do we do about that? Like, how do we actually manage those internal distractions?
Well, Bailey offers a few helpful tools. One that resonates with me is the practice of mindfulness meditation.
Mindfulness meditation. Okay, I've heard a lot about it, but I have to admit, I haven't really tried it myself.
Okay.
I tend to get impatient with those practices that require you to just like sit and be still.
Sure.
My mind just wants to be doing something, anything but just being present with my breath.
I understand. I understand. Our minds are so used to that constant stimulation, it can feel almost unbearable to just be still. But even a few minutes of, mindful breathing or a body scan meditation can make a world of difference. It's really about training your mind to notice those thoughts and feelings without judgment
Okay.
and allowing them to just come and go, like waves in the ocean.
Okay, I'm willing to give it a try, but what about those times when we're not meditating, and those distracting thoughts just keep popping up? Do we just, like, try to ignore them, push them away?
Ignoring or suppressing them usually just makes them stronger.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Instead, Bailey recommends this gentle approach that he calls noticing and returning. So you notice the thought,
Right.
you acknowledge it, but then you gently redirect your attention back to the present moment, to the task at hand, back to your breath.
Okay, so it's about acknowledging those thoughts without getting, like, swept away by them.
Exactly.
It's about, like, choosing where we direct our attention rather than being at the mercy of our wandering minds.
You get it.
I like that. It feels very empowering.
It is empowering. And it's a skill that takes practice, just like any other skill. The more we practice noticing those internal distractions and gently redirecting our attention, the stronger that focus muscle becomes.
Okay, so we've talked about creating those disconnection rituals,
Yes.
embracing those pockets of boredom throughout the day, and cultivating a mindful awareness of our, like, internal landscape.
Right. It's like we're building a toolkit for focus,
Yeah.
a set of practices and perspectives that can help us navigate this attention-demanding world, with more intention and ease.
Speaking of weaving things in, one strategy that really resonated with me was Bailey's idea of task batching.
Yes.
It's a simple concept, but it feels so powerful for, like, creating more focus and flow in our work.
It's a game changer.
Yeah.
Task batching. Instead of constantly switching between different types of tasks, we're creating dedicated blocks of time for similar activities.
Okay.
So we're minimizing mental clutter and tapping into a deeper level of focus.
So instead of, like, flitting back and forth between, like, email, writing, editing, planning, we might dedicate, like, a morning block to writing, an afternoon block to email, and so on.
Exactly.
It feels kind of counterintuitive, but I can see how having those, like, clear boundaries would actually free up mental space and allow us to get more done.
It does. It's about working with our natural rhythms and creating a structure that supports our focus rather than constantly fighting against it.
It's amazing how much our assumptions about productivity can actually sabotage our focus.
It's true.
We think multitasking is the key to getting more done, when in reality it's often like fragmenting our attention and depleting our energy.
Right. And our culture glorifies busyness and multitasking.
It does.
But Bailey suggests that a more mindful, intentional approach can actually lead to greater productivity and fulfillment.
And that brings us to another crucial element of Bailey's approach, right? It's this idea of aligning our actions with our values. He argues that when we're doing work that feels meaningful and purposeful, we're naturally more engaged and focused.
Makes sense. When we feel a deep sense of purpose in what we're doing, it's easier to stay motivated and focused, even when faced with, challenges or distractions.
But how do we actually connect with our values and make sure that our actions are, like, aligned with them?
Right.
Because it's easy to get caught up in, like, the daily grind and lose sight of what truly matters.
It is. And Bailey suggests we ask ourselves some key questions. What are we most passionate about? What kind of impact do we want to make in the world? What brings us joy and fulfillment?
So it's about taking the time to, like, reflect on what truly matters to us and then making those conscious choices to align our actions with those values.
It is.
And that might involve making some tough choices, saying no to commitments that drain our energy,
Yes.
or even reevaluating our career paths to make sure that they're, like, in alignment with our deeper purpose.
That's right.
This reminds me of something you mentioned earlier, the idea that our attention shapes our reality.
Yes.
If we're constantly directing our attention to things that don't truly matter to us, we're essentially shaping a reality that doesn't reflect our values or aspirations.
That's exactly right. It's about recognizing the power of our attention and making conscious choices about where we focus our energy.
And sometimes those choices involve, like, stepping away from the things that drain our focus, even if they seem important or urgent in the moment.
It does.
It's about prioritizing what truly matters
Absolutely.
and giving those things our full attention. And that can be a radical act in a world that constantly demands our attention.
Can be. It can be.
Okay, so we've talked about disconnection rituals, embracing boredom, managing internal distractions, aligning our actions with our values, and task batching. That's a lot. I'm feeling inspired, but also a little overwhelmed by all these strategies.
Sure.
So where do we even begin?
Well, you don't have to do everything at once. Bailey emphasizes starting small and building up gradually.
So maybe pick like one or two strategies that resonate with us.
Yes.
And just experiment with those first.
Exactly. Find what works best for you and integrate it into your life in a sustainable way.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. But before we move on, I think it's important to pause and remind our listener what Bailey sees as the ultimate benefit of cultivating a more focused life. Why should we bother with all of this? What's the payoff?
Well, Bailey believes that the state of our attention determines the state of our lives. A powerful statement, isn't it? When we're constantly distracted and overwhelmed, it creates this ripple effect that impacts every area of our lives.
So it's not just about getting more done.
No.
Or being more productive.
It's about creating a life that feels more fulfilling, more intentional, more aligned with who we truly are.
And when we reclaim our attention, we reclaim our power. We become more present in our interactions, more creative in our work, and more connected to the things that truly matter.
Yes.
I love that. It's a reminder that focus is not just about achieving external goals.
Right.
It's about cultivating an inner state of clarity, presence, and purpose.
And that, my friend, is a game changer.
You did it.
It's about moving from a state of reactivity to a state of intentionality.
I'm feeling inspired to put these principles into practice. In fact, I'm thinking about trying Bailey's 2-week experiment of reducing mental stimulation. It just feels like a powerful way to experience the benefits of focus firsthand.
I think that's a fantastic idea, and I encourage our listeners to join you.
Yes! Pick one or two of the strategies we discussed today and commit to implementing them for the next 2 weeks. Just pay attention to how it affects your focus, your creativity, your energy levels, your overall sense of well-being.
Yes. It's an invitation to step out of that distraction vortex and discover the power of a more focused life.
What do you say, listener? Are you ready to join us on this journey? As we've been talking about all these strategies for improving focus, I've been thinking about my own workspace.
Okay.
And it is definitely not optimized for focus. There's clutter everywhere.
Yeah.
The lighting is terrible and I'm constantly being interrupted. It makes me wonder, does our physical environment actually play a role in our ability to focus?
It totally does.
Wow.
Yeah, Bailey actually dedicates a whole section of his book to this.
Wow.
To creating what he calls a focus-friendly environment. And he argues that our surroundings can either support or sabotage our focus, and that we have more control over that than we might realize.
Okay, I am ready to transform my workspace into a focus haven. Where do we start? Is it all about, minimalist desks and those fancy noise-canceling headphones?
Those things can definitely help, but it's more about being intentional with the way we design our workspaces and tailoring them to our individual needs and preferences.
So one person's focus haven might be another person's distraction nightmare.
Exactly. There's no one-size-fits-all approach.
Yeah.
But there are some general principles we can apply to create an environment that supports our focus.
Okay, I'm all ears. Let's start with the basics. What are some simple things we can do to make our workspaces more focus-friendly?
Well, one of the simplest but most effective things you can do is just declutter your desk and your work area.
Yeah.
A cluttered space can lead to a cluttered mind.
Right.
It's about creating a sense of order and calm in your physical environment, which can then translate to a greater sense of clarity and focus in your mental environment.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like when my desk is a mess, it's like my thoughts are all jumbled up too. I can never find what I'm looking for. And I feel constantly distracted by the visual chaos.
Right.
But what about those people who actually thrive in a bit of organized chaos? Are they doomed?
Well, it's not about achieving perfect order or adhering to some rigid standard of minimalism. It's about finding what works best for you and your individual preferences.
Yeah.
For some people, that might mean a minimalist setup.
Right.
While others might prefer a bit more visual stimulation.
Yeah, that's me.
The key is to create a space that feels calming and supportive of your work, whatever that looks like for you.
So it's about creating a space that feels good to be in, a space that inspires and energizes you rather than drains and distracts you.
Exactly. And another important element of a focus-friendly environment is lighting. Natural light is ideal. It helps to regulate our circadian rhythms and boost our mood.
Oh, I completely agree. There's nothing quite like working in a space with like plenty of natural light streaming in. It makes such a difference in my energy levels and overall mood.
It does. And if you don't have access to natural light, try using full spectrum light bulbs,
Okay.
which mimic the properties of natural light. They can help reduce eye strain and fatigue, which can have a positive impact on your focus.
I've heard those full spectrum bulbs are also supposed to be better for our sleep quality,
They are.
which is a huge bonus.
It is. Good sleep is essential for focus and cognitive function. And speaking of things that can impact our focus, let's talk about temperature.
Okay.
You might be surprised to learn that a slightly cooler temperature can actually improve focus and productivity.
Really?
Yeah,
I always thought it was better to be like warm and cozy when working, but maybe a little chill in the air can help to like keep us alert and prevent those afternoon slumps.
it's worth experimenting to see what temperature works best for you. And while we're on the topic of, creating a stimulating environment, let's not forget about the power of scent.
Scent. Really? I never even thought about that as a factor in focus.
Believe it or not, certain scents, like peppermint or citrus, can actually stimulate the brain and enhance focus.
So like diffusing some essential oils while we work or even just having a fresh smelling candle nearby could give our focus a little boost.
Exactly. It's a subtle but surprisingly effective way to enhance your environment and support your focus.
Okay, so we've talked about decluttering, lighting, temperature, and scent. What else should we be thinking about when it comes to creating a focus-friendly environment?
Well, one of the most important things, perhaps even more important than all those other elements, is minimizing distractions.
That seems pretty obvious, but it's definitely easier said than done, especially in today's world where distractions are everywhere we turn.
You're absolutely right. It requires a conscious effort to create boundaries and protect our focus. This might mean having a dedicated workspace where you can close the door and minimize interruptions.
That's a luxury that not everyone has,
Sure.
especially those of us who work from home or in like shared office spaces. What are some strategies for those of us who don't have the option of like a dedicated office?
Well, it might require getting creative. Maybe it's a specific corner of your home that you designate as your focus zone,
Right.
or a quiet corner in a library or coffee shop, or even just a designated time block where you turn off all notifications and minimize external distractions.
And noise canceling headphones can be a lifesaver in those situations.
They are.
I don't know what I would do without mine.
Absolutely. They can be a game changer for creating a sense of auditory privacy and blocking out those distracting noises. But it's not just about managing those external distractions.
Mm-hmm.
It's also about cultivating a more focus-friendly internal environment.
Our internal environment. What do you mean by that?
I'm talking about our thoughts and feelings and overall mental state.
Mm.
These things play a huge role in our ability to focus.
So it's not just about what's happening around us, it's also about what's happening inside us.
Exactly. Our internal state can either support or sabotage our focus. If we're feeling stressed, anxious, or overwhelmed, it's going to be much harder to concentrate.
That makes perfect sense. It's like when my mind is racing, it's like my thoughts are 1,000 squirrels all scampering in different directions.
Huh.
It's impossible to focus on anything.
I think we can all relate to that feeling. But the good news is that we can train our minds to be more focus-friendly.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How do we do that? Is it all about like meditation and positive affirmations?
Those things can be helpful, but it's more about cultivating a mindset that supports focus.
Right.
And one of the most important aspects of that mindset is self-awareness.
Self-awareness. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's about paying attention to your thoughts and feelings, noticing when your mind is wandering, and becoming aware of what triggers those distractions.
So it's like becoming a detective of our own minds.
Exactly. Once you start paying attention to your patterns of distraction, you can begin to develop strategies for managing them.
That's a really empowering idea that we have the ability to understand and influence our own minds.
It is. And it's not about being perfect or never getting distracted. It's about noticing when it happens and gently redirecting your attention back to the task at hand.
But what about all those like negative thoughts and self-doubt that can creep in and like sabotage our focus? How do we deal with those?
Well, this is where self-compassion comes in. It's about being kind and understanding toward yourself even when you make mistakes. or struggle to focus.
Because let's be honest, we're all human, and we all have those moments where our focus falters.
We do.
So instead of saying, like, I can't believe I got distracted again,
Right.
we can say, okay, my mind wandered. What triggered that? And how can I gently guide my attention back to the task at hand?
Exactly. It's about treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding that you would offer a good friend.
That's such a powerful reminder. We're often so much harder on ourselves than we would ever be on anyone else. And I think that self-criticism can actually be a major distraction in itself.
It can be. So being mindful of your self-talk and practicing self-compassion is crucial for creating a more focus-friendly internal environment.
This has been such an insightful conversation. It feels like we've covered a lot of ground today, from the science of attention
We have.
to practical strategies for managing distractions, creating focus-friendly environments, and cultivating a mindset that supports focus.
We've covered it all.
Yeah.
And I think the key takeaway is that focus is a skill that can be cultivated.
Huh?
It's not something we either have or don't have. It's something we can develop and strengthen with practice and intention.
And it's not about being perfect or never getting distracted. It's about being aware of those distractions, managing them effectively, and gently guiding our attention back to the things that truly matter.
Beautifully said.
And most importantly, be kind to yourself along the way.
Absolutely. Self-compassion is key. We all have those moments where our focus falters, and that's okay. What matters is that we keep coming back to the present moment, to the task at hand, to the things that truly matter.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive into the world of focus. We've covered a lot of ground, and I hope our listener feels inspired and empowered to take action.
Me get too. Remember, focus is a superpower. It's the key to unlocking your potential, achieving your goals, and living a life that feels truly meaningful.
Thank you for joining us on this journey of exploration. Until next time, stay curious and stay focused.